This week is Holy Week, the week of preparation for Easter, and today is Maundy Thursday, one of the most solemn days of the Christian year, and we have seen His Majesty the King at York Minster, where for the first time as the sovereign he has taken part in a long-held tradition of the British monarchy, the Maundy ceremony. In this video I want to tell you all about this ceremony, how it originated, what it means, what happens in it, and why it still takes place today. April's issue of my magazine The Antiquary is now available. Articles this month are on dubious princesses, caves, girdles, and Dick Turpin the Highwayman. Thanks to all my readers and subscribers for your kind support. Purchasing The Antiquary magazine helps support this channel directly. Follow the link above if you would like to subscribe or purchase the latest copy or any back issues. So, firstly, Maundy Thursday. What is it and why does it have this unusual name? Maundy Thursday is the day before Good Friday, when we commemorate Christ's crucifixion. On the night before the crucifixion, Christ shared with his disciples his last Passover meal in the upper room, what we call the Last Supper. During that, taking bread and wine, he commanded his disciples to continue to break bread and share wine together, that these would be his body and blood, and he instituted the Holy Eucharist, the Mass, the Holy Communion. So on the Thursday before Good Friday, Maundy Thursday, we commemorate that event and that command. Before the Last Supper, the Gospel writers record that Jesus washed his disciples' feet, and as St. John's Gospel recounts, Jesus then said, "If I then, your Lord and Teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." Now at the Mass of Maundy Thursday in the Middle Ages, a reenaction of this event was performed by the principal priest or minister present, and while this was being undertaken, the choir would sing some other words from St. John's Gospel, some of the final words Jesus said to his disciples before he leaves the upper room and is betrayed. "Mandatum novum de vobis ut delegatis in vicem sicut delexi vos." I give you a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Words that reflect what the action of the foot washing signifies. It is from the opening word mandatum that the Middle English word Maundy derives. So Maundy Thursday is, if you like, Commandment Thursday. And on this day, as well as commemorating Christ's command for the Church to celebrate the Eucharist, the Church thinks about Christ's commandment that we should love one another as he loves us. Well, you might be asking, what on earth has this got to do with the king? Well, from Anglo-Saxon times, prominent personages, bishops and nobles were often involved in the foot washing on Maundy Thursday. And from the 13th century at least, the kings of England were among them, and they got down on their hands and knees and they washed the feet of the poor on Maundy Thursday. Henry VIII seems to have instituted a tradition that the English king washed the feet of the same number of poor people as his age, and both Mary I, his daughter, and then his daughter Elizabeth I continued that tradition. The foot washing ceremony, the Maundy ceremony, seems to have taken place in one of the halls of a royal palace in London. There is an account of Mary I's Royal Maundy in 1556 by Marco Antonio Fiata, who was the secretary to Archbishop of Canterbury Cardinal Pole, which gives us a real insight into how the ceremony worked in the late medieval and early modern period. Fiata says that 40 poor women, one for every year of the Queen's age, had their feet washed by the Queen. This is his account. He says, Her Majesty knelt down on both her knees before the first of the poor women, and taking in the left hand the woman's right foot, she washed it with her own right hand, drying it very thoroughly with the towel which hung at her neck, and having signed it with the cross, she kissed the foot so fervently that it seemed as if she were embracing something very precious. She did the like by all and each of the other poor women, one by one, each of the ladies her attendants giving her in turn their basin and ewer and towel. And I vow to you that in all her movements and gestures, and by her manner, she seemed to act thus not merely out of ceremony, but from great feeling and devotion. After the foot washing, the sovereign then gave alms to those poor people. And Faeta again gives the best account of the almsgiving from Mary's reign. Then the Queen went along and gave to each woman a large wooden platter with enough food for 4 persons, filled with great pieces of salted fish and 2 large loaves. She then went along the line again, giving to each of the women a wooden bowl filled with wine. The giving of clothing stopped in the reign of Elizabeth I, who replaced it with a gift of a guinea. In this ceremony, the sovereign was attended by a number of important officials, by the Dean of the Chapel Royal, the head of the Chapels Royal, by an official called the Lord High Almoner and his assistant, the Sub-Almoner. The Lord High Almoner, who was usually a bishop, was the person in the royal household who was responsible for heading up the almonry, which was a small department that distributed alms to the poor. For the foot washing, Mary I and her attendants wore long linen aprons, and they had long towels hung around their neck, and they held posies of flowers in their hands. Before the Queen performed the foot washing, the poor women's feet were washed 3 times first. Firstly by a servant of the royal household, then by the Sub-Almoner, and then by the Lord High Almoner. When the sovereign wasn't present themselves to perform this ceremony, which was infrequent in the 16th century, then the Lord High Almoner would perform it on their behalf. In the early 17th century, Charles I seems to have infrequently undertaken the Maundy himself, though after the Restoration his sons Charles II and James II did perform it in person. But after 1698, the sovereign never attended again until the 20th century, but the service continued. The washing of the feet was performed until 1727, when it was then discontinued. However, the almsgiving that followed it, almsgiving in kind, continued until the 1830s. There is an account of the ceremony in 1826. At this point it was taking place in the Chapel Royal at Whitehall, what is now the banqueting house. Behind the banqueting house, a temporary building was erected containing 2 rooms. One was a room for the reception of the almsmen and had big tables in it, and the other was a larder that was stuffed full of food to be distributed to them. The almsmen arrived at 11 a.m. on Maundy Thursday, and they were then seated, and to each of them was given a piece of beef, a loaf, 2 salt salmon, 2 salt cod, and 18 salt herrings. Beer was then provided, a toast to the king was given, and then the almsmen took their provisions home. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they then returned to the chapel for the second half of the ceremony, when the Maundy money was distributed. As in the reign of Mary Tudor, the money given represented the age of the sovereign, though it was changed a little in Charles II's reign, when, rather than ordinary currency, specially minted money began to be issued for the first time. The guinea that Elizabeth introduced continued to be distributed too. In the reign of William IV, it was discovered that the almsmen were often selling the food that they'd been given for less than the crown had actually paid to buy it. And in 1837, for his last Royal Maundy, King William IV replaced all the gifts in kind with an additional substantial cash gift of 30 shillings. This was much more than a month's wages for a working man. So by 1837, not only had the foot washing disappeared, but the alms in kind had gone too. And from there on in, 3 purses were distributed. Firstly, a green or a white purse containing a gift of money in lieu of clothing. Then a second white purse containing the specially minted Maundy money. And lastly, a third red purse containing the gift that was given in lieu of the food provisions. At this point in history, the Maundy almsmen were not appointed every year, but were appointed for life and could receive the alms every year for the rest of their life. So the royal alms were a substantial and a meaningful gift in the lifetime of a recipient. So having not bothered to do the Maundy ceremony themselves for about 200 years, in the 20th century, British sovereigns began to perform it again. George V performed it for the first time in 1932. George VI performed it in 1940 and then in 1944 and for the rest of his life. But it was really his daughter, our late Queen Elizabeth II, who made it a fixture of the royal calendar, and she only missed the ceremony 5 times during her reign. The last year of her reign, 2022, her place was taken by the Prince of Wales, now our King. It was always a London-based ceremony for much of its history, taking place in one of the royal palaces, usually Whitehall. But Queen Elizabeth II innovated in the 1950s by starting to move it around the country. It has been held in every cathedral in England and has also been held once in Wales and once in Northern Ireland. It was the late Queen's rule that the ceremony should only take place in London every 10 years, and I think the King will follow that rule. Today, various elements of the medieval ceremony are still reflected in this annual event, but only in a symbolic manner. Today, in York Minster, the King, as in the Tudor period, was attended by the Lord High Almoner, currently the Bishop of Worcester, and the Sub-Almoner, the Subdean of the Chapel Royal. And both had linen towels tied around and over their vestments. But these are now purely symbolic. As no foot washing ever takes place now, they are simply reminders of the origin of the ceremony. The main part of the ceremony is the King distributing the Maundy money to as many recipients as his age. So this year in York Minster, he distributed Maundy money to 74, perhaps 75 men and women. The yeomen of the guard are in attendance and they bear in large alms dishes containing the Maundy money as they did in the 19th century. The Maundy money is still contained within leather purses, which are passed by one of the yeomen of the guard to the sub-almoner, who passes them to the higher almoner and then to the King. The form of the money gift changed in the 1970s, with the gift given in lieu of clothing being dispensed with, and now only 2 purses are distributed. The recipients are now given a white purse, in which is the specially minted Maundy money. The value of the money still reflects the age of the sovereign. This year it is worth 74 pence. Although Maundy money is rare and very collectible and is worth much more than that face value. In the red purse is money that is the money given in lieu of the provisions in the past. It is still the equivalent of the 30 shillings given first in 1837. In 1837, 30 shillings was rather a lot of money, but the sum has never been adjusted for inflation in the interim. So by the time decimalisation occurred in the 1970s, 30 shillings was worth only £1.50. You can't buy a pint of beer for £1.50 in 2023, let alone a large quantity of roast beef, bread and salt fish. So instead of standard currency, the £1.50 is now a nominal gift that is represented by specially minted commemorative coinage. This ceremony of the Royal Maundy has gone from being, in the medieval and early modern period, a real hands-on example of the sovereign's humility and generosity, into something quite different in the 20th and 21st century. It still reflects Christ's mandatum to love one another, but in a distinctly different way. Today, the distribution of the Royal Maundy by the sovereign has become an honour for the recipients, the almsmen and women, and rather than a financial lifeline for those in poverty, it is given, in effect, as an award to recognise service. These 74 men and women who have been chosen to receive the token arms of the King have been chosen as they've all done good work and loving service in their communities. They have been nominated by churches across the land for fulfilling in their own lives Christ's command, Christ's mandatum. There is one more element of the ceremony that I must mention, and it's a hangover from the Tudor period. And that is that the sovereign and the officers of the almonry carry sweet-smelling flowers in a posy as they perform their work. In the Tudor period, these were carried so that these people would not be overcome by the smell of the unwashed poor. They are traditionally called nosegays. The word gay in this context refers to something that cheers something else up. And they are a posy of sweet-smelling flowers that is meant to cheer and delight the sense of smell. All the primary members of the royal party today, the King, the Queen, the Lord High Almoner and the Sub-Almoner, all carried nosegays of flowers, not now because they are concerned by the smell of the great unwashed, but like many a tradition in Britain, because nosegays have always been a feature of the ceremony for as long as anyone remembers. Thanks very much for watching.